Good to see you again.
Yes.
This revolution in technology that people are experiencing now, for many people creates a sense of unease. Where does that come from, according to you?
I think the sense of unease comes from the possibility that we may be remaking human nature in some ways. And so the new developments in biotechnology and in science raise big questions about what it means to be a human being, about what gives our lives meaning. And these, of course, are not scientific questions. They're the largest moral and human questions. So I think the challenge today is to figure out how to take advantage of the great breakthroughs in biotechnology and in genetics for human health and well-being without allowing those technologies, those tools to define our purposes for us. Mm-hmm. And this is not an easy thing to do.
No.
To make sure that we deliberate as human beings, as democratic citizens, about the proper uses of technology. Because technology by itself is neither a blessing nor a curse. Mm-hmm. What matters, technology is just a set of tools that we invent or that we discover. What matters are the ends and the purposes to which we put these tools, these technological developments. And those are moral and civic questions, mm-hmm. not scientific mm-hmm. questions.
But it brings us to a deeper, difficult question. Are we allowed to tamper with human nature? Because there's no God we believe in, and there's even perhaps no self we can believe in, because science teaches us basically a bunch of neurological processes. Right. So where is my human nature, and what are my moral instincts worth in dealing with the technologies that can change it?
Yes, it's a great question. We are sometimes lulled into thinking that science can give us a new theory of human nature. Really, to understand human nature is to study history, philosophy, anthropology, literature. In short, it's a question of meaning. Now, science involves an inquiry into nature, the natural world, including us. We are physical, biological beings. So science has something to say about human nature, but it's not the last word. Mm-hmm. Even if we could have a map, a scientific map of the brain, that still wouldn't tell us who we are mm-hmm. and what purposes we should pursue.
Do you think this idea of being human, because a lot of it is instinct or is tradition or culture, is it under threat by science?
Our humanity is not under threat by science, I don't think. Not by science as such, but by a mistaken idea about what science can teach us. Mm-hmm. See, the danger is not science, but scientism. Mm-hmm. Scientism is a kind of world picture that assumes that science by itself can explain everything about us. Mm-hmm. And that's what's dangerous. Mm-hmm. Scientism, not science. This false attitude, it's a kind of scientism treats science as if it were a god.
Mm-hmm. Now, I've talked to some scientists, they will say, whatever is available to people or whatever is on the market, they will use in the end. Like, for instance, if you can discover babies with Down syndrome, you can just abort them. So in the end, there's no morality, does only go so far in their viewpoint. What do you think about that?
I agree that whenever a technology becomes available that seems useful to some aim or goal or ambition people have, especially in market societies like ours, there will be a market for it. People will try to use these things. So, for example, if it's possible to give children growth hormone to grow taller, then some parents will use it for its intended medical purpose to deal with children, to help children with genetic abnormalities. But that medical use, the people won't stop there. Parents of children of average height, perfectly healthy children, go now to the pediatrician and say, but my child wants to be on the basketball team, wants to be 7 feet tall. Why can't I be prescribed this human growth hormone for him or for her? So there is a tendency, once the technology is available, to overreach. That's not about health. That's about fueling a certain competitive drive in our society. And in a way, it's using that child as an instrument. This is really about an arms race for a competitive society. Only now it's an arms race that is fueled by new biotechnological possibilities. And I think that can be dangerous.
How does it affect society, you think?
What these genetic enhancements aim at, fundamentally, is fitting ourselves to the social roles we have. I say that's a kind of deep disempowerment, to change ourselves through biotechnology to fit the world and the social roles we've created, rather than to question and debate whether we've designed the system of roles and rewards in a just way. So I think one of the dangers of seeing biotechnology as a cure for inequality or disadvantage or for poverty is that it distracts us from reflecting critically on the way we've organized our societies and our economies, and simply treats those who lose out as unfit.
You talked about competition, that
Yes.
people are willing to do their best, so use technology as a tool, as an instrument. Is there also the danger of that we ourselves see ourselves more and more like machines in a way?
Yes.
And we have these wearables that you can see how much sleep you got. You see yourself more or less as a machine. Is that also a kind of dangerous influence of technology, you think?
Yes, I think it is dangerous. The growing tendency or temptation to think of ourselves as machines. This idea of the popularity of wearable devices that enable a person to monitor every breath, every heartbeat, every step, every biological function. I think it's damaging, not because it hurts other people, not because it may give me a competitive edge if I'm preparing for a marathon or training. It's damaging because I think it leads to a hyper self-consciousness about the body. It's a kind of technologically encouraged hypochondria. And that distorts the role that health should play in a good life. I think two things are lost. One is respect for the dignity of human persons, not just as tools to carry out various tasks. So human dignity is one of the things at stake. But there's also something else, which is a respect for the given character of human gifts and limitations. Part of being human is to learn how to contend with, to cope with, and maybe sometimes even to appreciate our limitations as well as our talents. Now, we rail against our limitations. We strive to overcome them. But in that striving, there's a kind of negotiation that is distinctly human. So when Lance Armstrong turns out to have been engaged in this enhancement, performance enhancement, why do we criticize him? Partly because he was cheating. But suppose it were available to everyone. Would we still object? I think, yes, we'd still be uneasy about it because it's dehumanizing in a way. It's using the body of the athlete, in his case, as a machine. It's converting it to a kind of machine. And so it's not only cheating, it's not only the fairness worry, it's the worry about what is the inner purpose and meaning of this activity, and how does it connect to human striving and excellence and aspiration? These are the deeper questions raised by these new technologies. I think to some extent society as a whole has to decide, ideally democratically after full public debate. Take an extreme example. During the Boston Marathon here, we have a race here in Boston every year. Runners from around the world come. And one year, the person who won the women's part of the Boston Marathon, a woman named Rosie Ruiz, crossed the finish line first. It turned out she had cheated. She began the race at the starting line, and then, when no one was looking, went into the underground, into the subway, took the subway near to the finish line, got out, and crossed the finish line first. Now, this obviously was cheating. Riding the subway was not part of running the Boston Marathon. But you could say she was using a form of technology to enhance her performance. But even beyond cheating, once these technologies become routine and widespread, they change the character and the meaning, the human meaning of the activity, whether it's to do with academic performance or athletic competition or being good parents. And that's why it's not simply a matter that we can leave to the market, to consumers making individual choices. These are matters that we as democratic citizens have to debate and deliberate together and decide about together.